Marshals ready. Drivers ready. Live in 5.
Hey guys, welcome back to Live in 5RC. Today, I want to go over a topic that we were discussing on Facebook, bladder shocks versus emulsion shocks. I think the biggest thing to determine which is best for you is just testing. So I highly recommend picking up emulsion shocks if they're available for your vehicle and just giving them a try at your local track. So then you can compare the differences between the two and determine which is best for your setup and your style of driving. Let's first start with the bladder shock cap. So the bladder shock cap has two main components, the rubber bladder, which is available in a couple of different styles, but as you can see, this one is just an orange rubber bladder. They also make a honeycomb style bladder, but as you can see, this one is just the rubber, and then it has a solid cap with two pinhole bleeder holes. And then the next one is the emulsion shock cap. It has three main components, the shock cap, the O-ring seal, and then the actual bleeder screw. There's two different styles. This one you can see has a little aluminum washer. They also make one that has a rubber O-ring, so it just depends on which style of shock cap that you have would determine if it has the O-ring or the metal washer. So let's take a look at the bladder shock cap. So with the bladder shock cap, as you can see, I have my bladder inserted. It is seated correctly all the way around, I made sure. And then there's two little pinholes on each side of the cap for the actual bleeding of the shock oil. So you want to fill up this shock body with the desired oil that you want, either for your setup or for the track temperatures. And then go ahead and screw on the shock cap. And I usually screw it on about 3/4 of the way to begin with. And then what I'm going to do is depress the shock shaft all the way up. And you will get some excess fluid coming out of those tiny little bleeder holes, and that's okay because we're going to go ahead and bleed the shock. So then I'll start tightening down the shock cap. And again, we'll still have some excess fluid coming out of our bleeder holes, which is perfectly fine. And then I stop just before it's finished tightening all the way. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to work the shock shaft up and down, nice and slow, to get all of the air bubbles and get as much air out of the bleeder holes as possible. So once you have, you think that you have all of the air out, what I typically do is I grab the shock adjusting nut, and then with my pinky I hold down the eyelet, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is tighten this up as much as possible. And as you can see, I do actually have some excess fluid coming out of my bleeder, so we'll wipe that off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and check, once I have that nice and snug, I'm going to go ahead and check my shock shaft for the desired rebound. So I like no rebound in my shocks, so if this did have diff fluid or shock oil in it, this would probably be what I'd be looking for. So then the last piece, once you get that nice and snug, would be to grab your shock pliers, grab your shock body, and snug it up as much as possible. So that is the bladder shock build, or bladder shock cap build and bleed. So now on to the emulsion shock cap. So like we discussed, the emulsion shock cap has three main components: the actual cap, the O-ring seal, and the bleeder screw. So the first thing that you want to do is make sure that that O-ring seal is seated as best as possible. And one tip that I would give you is to make sure, try not to at least, use any tools to get that O-ring to seat. Because if you either puncture or slice or do anything to that O-ring, then the shock cap will not seal appropriately. So then we'll go ahead and fill our shock body up with the desired shock oil. Make sure you get all the air pockets out of your shock oil so that you don't have any excess air in there. And then I'm going to do pretty much the same thing that I did with my bladder, but I'm actually going to leave that bleeder screw out, 100% leave it out. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten down my shock cap about 3/4 of the way. So just like that. And what I'm going to do then is, again, I'm going to start working my shaft up and down to get as much air out as possible. Once I feel comfortable that I've gotten most of the air out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this down until I start to feel a resistance on the shock cap. So right there, I start feeling resistance. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work the shock cap out and in, out and in, out and in. And what that does, that ensures that the O-ring is going to seat properly so that we don't have any leaks from our shock cap. So in and out. Once I feel like I'm comfortable with the O-ring seal, I'm going to tighten it down as much as possible. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab the adjuster nut, and then I'm going to grab my shock shaft, and I'm going to place it all the way up so that I have zero rebound. Hold it with my pinky again, just like that, and then I'm going to tighten down my shock cap. Now this is where the emulsion cap comes into play. So before, with our bladder, we had to bleed out of the little pinholes on the side, but now we have our bleeder hole here with our set screw, so that we can just go ahead, adjust our shock shaft so we get all the air out, take our set screw, and then place our set screw. And what I'm going to do is actually hold the, like with my pinky again, hold the bottom and then insert my set screw. The one thing I can caution, actually it's about to happen, is that to make sure that this screw is aligned properly so that you do not cross thread it. If you cross thread it, then the cap will be no longer useful. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to snug it up as much as possible and then check my shock shaft rebound. So if you have too much rebound, say you push it all the way up and then it rebounds back, I don't know, 15% or so, what you can do is go ahead and loosen that bleeder screw and work your shock shaft to get excess air and oil out of the shock cap. And then once you feel comfortable with it again, hold it and tighten your bleeder screw. Just like that. So now that we looked at both the bladder shock cap and the emulsion shock cap, it's time to do some testing at the track. Like I said, if I were you, I would just pick both of them up if they're available for your vehicle and just try them out at your local track and see which one that you like better, the style of cap that you like better, which one handles better for your driving style, or just which one you prefer. But other than that, thanks for watching the video today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave those down below. Or you can also message us on Facebook at LiveIn5RC. Be sure to check out the rest of the videos on our channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. We also have a really cool series on getting into RC racing. So if you're interested in getting into RC racing and haven't done anything like that before, please feel free to check out that series. But other than that, I think we're finished here, so let's go hit the track.